When guilt-ridden physical therapist Lyla Anderson takes a job at the mysterious Blackwood estate, she has no idea she's about to meet her match in Grayson Blackwood, a wheelchair-bound billionaire with blood on his hands and secrets darker than her own. Story time, fam. And this one is dripping with romance, secrets, and one unforgettable twist. Let's jump straight into it. Asterisk, the needle slipped from Lyla Anderson's trembling fingers for the third time that morning, clattering against the cracked linoleum of her studio apartment. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to silence the screaming voices that had haunted her for months. Withdrawal was getting worse, not better. And the job interview at the Blackwood estate was in 2 hours. She stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, noting the dark circles beneath what had once been vibrant green eyes. Her auburn hair hung limp and unwashed, framing a face that looked far older than her 28 years. The woman staring back was a ghost of the accomplished physical therapist she'd once been. Before the accident that had claimed her patient's life and sent her spiraling into a hell of prescription pills and self-destruction, the bus ride to the estate felt like a journey to her execution. Through rain-streaked windows, she watched the city's decay give way to manicured lawns and towering gates. The Blackwood mansion rose before her like a fortress, its Gothic architecture cutting sharp lines against the storm-darkened sky. Every instep toward those imposing doors felt like a lie she was about to tell. Martha, the elderly housekeeper, led her through hallways lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors. The air smelled of old money and older secrets, thick with the weight of generations of power. They reached the study. Lila's breath caught in her throat. Grayson Blackwood sat behind an enormous mahogany desk, his presence commanding despite the wheelchair that held him. His gray eyes were like winter storms, cold and calculating as they assessed her with unsettling intensity. Dark hair swept back from a face that would have been handsome if not for the bitter lines etched around his mouth. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his early 30s, but carried himself with the weariness of someone who had seen too much. "Miss Anderson," his voice was velvet wrapped around steel. "Your credentials are impressive. Harvard Medical, chief therapist at Metropolitan General, published research in neuromuscular rehabilitation." He leaned forward, those piercing eyes, never leaving hers. "So tell me, what brings someone of your caliber to accept a position in my particular circle of hell?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Lyla felt her carefully rehearsed lies crumble under his gaze. There was something predatory in the way he watched her, as if he could smell the desperation radiating from her skin. "I believe in second chances," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Second chances." He repeated the words as if tasting poison. How refreshingly naive. "And whose second chance are we discussing, Miss Anderson? Yours or mine?" The accusation in his tone made her blood run cold. Somehow he knew. Perhaps not the details, but he could sense the guilt that followed her like a shadow. She lifted her chin, meeting his stare with as much defiance as she could muster. "Both," she said simply. For a long moment they regarded each other across the expanse of his desk. The rain hammered against the windows with increasing fury, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like an ominous warning. When Grayson finally spoke, his words carried the weight of a man who had already decided her fate. "Very well, you can start tomorrow, but understand this, Miss Anderson." He wheeled closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver. In his gray eyes could smell the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask something darker underneath. "I don't believe in rehabilitation. I don't believe in hope. I certainly don't believe in redemption. You're here because I need someone desperate enough to stay when this inevitably goes to hell." His words hit her like physical blows, but Lyla held her ground. "And you're here because you need someone broken enough to understand what that feels like." The silence that followed was electric, charged with recognition and mutual understanding. Two damaged souls circling each other, both hiding wounds too deep to heal. Grayson's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something that might have been surprise or respect. "Tomorrow at 8, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be late." "And Miss Anderson?" She paused at the doorway, her hand on the ornate brass handle. "Whatever demons brought you to my door, They'd better be prepared for the fight of their lives, 'cause mine had been waiting for company. As Lyla walked back through the rain toward the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just signed a contract written in blood. Behind her, through the mansion's towering windows, Grayson Blackwood watched her go, his fingers drumming against the leather armrest of his wheelchair. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something. Other than emptiness, something that terrified him far more than the accident that had stolen his legs. He felt curious. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Lyla began to understand why Grayson Blackwood was considered one of the most dangerous men in the city. It wasn't just his wealth or his connections, though both were formidable. It was the way he studied. People collecting their weaknesses like a curator gathering rare artifacts. And she was becoming his most interesting specimen. She arrived each morning at precisely 8, her hands steadier now that she'd found a delicate balance between sobriety and function. 2 pills in the morning, 1 at lunch, nothing after 3 o'clock. It wasn't recovery, but it was survival, and for now, that was enough. Grayson had made no mention of her confession, but something fundamental had shifted between them. There. Sessions had evolved into a complex dance of physical therapy and psychological warfare, each testing the other's boundaries with increasing boldness. "Your technique is improving," she noted, as he completed a set of pull-ups on the modified bar sheet installed. Sweat gleamed on his shoulders, and despite her professional training, she couldn't help but notice the powerful lines of his back, the way his muscles moved beneath scarred skin. "Flattery, Miss Anderson? How unlike you?" "Facts, Mr. Blackwood. Nothing more." Lowered himself back into his wheelchair, accepting the towel she offered with fingers that brushed against hers a moment longer than necessary. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, and from the knowing look in his eyes, he felt it too. "Tell me about the patient," he said suddenly, his voice deceptively casual as he wiped sweat from his face. "What patient?" "The one you killed." The words hit her like ice water. She turned away, focusing on organizing her equipment with mechanical precision. "I don't see how that's relevant to your treatment." "Everything's relevant to my treatment. I like to know who I'm trusting with." "My body." He wheeled closer, his presence at her back like heat from a fire. Her name was Sarah Chen. 23 years old. Car accident victim, recovering from a traumatic brain injury. You were driving her to a cognitive therapy appointment when you rear-ended an 18-wheeler while texting your ex-boyfriend. Lila's hands stilled on the resistance bands she'd been untangling. "How did you? I told you. I've done my research." The lawsuit was settled out of court, but the medical board wasn't so forgiving. License suspended, reputation destroyed, career ended. That's when you discovered the joys of pharmaceutical self-medication. She turned to face him, anger and shame warring in her chest. "What's your point?" "My point is that we're both killers. Miss Anderson. The only difference is that my victim deserved it." The casual admission stopped her breath. Grayson watched her reaction with clinical interest, as if her shock were a data point in some larger experiment. "Surprised you shouldn't be? Men like me don't accumulate this kind of power by playing nice. No, I'll admit, pushing Marcus Vale off that balcony was more personal than business." Marcus Vale. The name triggered a memory from the news coverage she'd avoided for months. The journalist. The journalist who was investigating my father's business practices, who threatened to expose secrets that would have destroyed not just the company but innocent people caught in the crossfire. Grayson's voice remained perfectly calm, but his knuckles were white where they gripped his armrests. "He gave me an ultimatum that night at the charity gala. Cooperate with his investigation or watch everything my family built burn to the ground. So you killed him." So I removed a threat. The balcony railing was faulty, a tragic accident during a moment of heated conversation. At least that's what the security footage showed after it was properly edited. Lyla stared at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. It's not just a bitter man confined to a wheelchair, but a predator who had orchestrated murder with the same cold precision he brought to everything else. "Why are you telling me this?" "'Cause honesty is the foundation of any therapeutic relationship. And because I suspect you understand the weight of taking a life, even by accident." He studied her face, reading her reactions like pages in a book. "The guilt eats at you, doesn't it? The knowledge that one moment of carelessness destroyed everything you were. It's not the same thing, she whispered, isn't it? We both made choices that led to death. The only difference is intention, and I'm not entirely convinced that matters to the dead. His words were poison, seeping into the cracks of her already fractured psyche. But there was something else in his voice now, something that sounded almost like understanding. The accident that put me in this chair, he continued, his gaze distant. It wasn't random. The brakes on my car had been tampered with, a gift from Vale's associates who thought killing me would be easier than discrediting me. They were wrong on both counts. You survived, barely. Spent 6 months in a coma, another year learning. To accept that my legs would never work again, but I had something they didn't count on. His eyes refocused on her with laser intensity. I had rage, concentrated fury that kept me alive when everything else said I should die, and now, I'm tired of being angry. It's exhausting maintaining that level of hatred. Which brings me to an interesting proposition. Lyla's pulse quickened. What kind of proposition? Move in. Take the guest wing. Full room and board. Triple your current salary. Be available for sessions whenever I need them. That's highly irregular. Professional boundaries exist for a reason. Professional boundaries are a luxury neither of us can afford. You need money and a place to hide from whatever sent you. Running to my door. I need someone who won't quit when things get uncomfortable. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. And we both need someone who understands what it's like to carry blood on their hands. The offer was tempting beyond reason. Her landlord had been calling daily about overdue rent, and the withdrawal symptoms were getting harder to hide. But accepting would mean stepping fully into Grayson's world. A place where moral lines blurred and consequences were negotiated rather than faced. I need time to think about it. You have until tomorrow? He spun his wheelchair toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Miss Anderson. Your friend Oliver called while you were setting up. Something about dinner plans. Told Martha to take a message. The casual mention of Oliver sent a chill down her spine. You had no right to. I had every right. This is my house, and I decide who has access to my staff. He turned back to her, his smile sharp with possession. If you accept my offer, that access becomes considerably more restricted. After he left, Lyla stood alone in the sunroom, surrounded by equipment designed to heal and strengthen. But all she could think about was the darkness in Grayson's eyes. When he'd spoken of murder and the answering darkness she'd felt stirring in her own chest, that evening, as she rode the bus back to her crumbling apartment, she didn't notice the black sedan following 2 cars behind. Inside, the man with the expensive suit spoke into his phone once again. She's getting closer to him. They're building, it's making her vulnerable. When do you want us to move? Soon came the cold reply. Very soon, but first, let her fall completely. A broken heart is so much easier to manipulate than a guarded one. Lyla moved into the Blackwood estate on a Tuesday that felt like stepping through the looking glass into a world where normal rules no longer applied. Her few possessions looked pathetic in the opulent guest wing, but the private bathroom with its marble surfaces and endless hot water felt like paradise after months of cold showers in her studio apartment. More importantly, the estate's isolation provided a buffer between her and the pills that called from every pharmacy in the city. Here, with Grayson's watchful eyes tracking her every movement, maintaining the careful balance of her addiction, felt possible. Their sessions had intensified, both physically and emotionally. Grayson pushed himself harder than any patient she'd ever worked with, as if punishing his body for its betrayal. But it was the moments between exercises that proved most dangerous, when conversation flowed like wine and the walls they'd both built began to crumble. You're different here, he observed during their 4th week together. They sat on the terrace overlooking the estate's gardens, sharing lunch in a ritual that had evolved naturally from professional necessity. Different how? Less haunted. Still damaged, but less likely to shatter at any moment. His gray eyes studied her face with unsettling intensity. The pills help, but that's not all of it. Maybe it's the company, she said carefully. Misery loves company, remember? Is that what this is? Shared misery? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to voice. Before she could answer, Oliver's voice drifted from inside the house, warm and familiar. As he spoke with Martha about business matters, the sound made Grayson's expression harden instantly. Your knight in shining armor has been particularly attentive lately. Oliver had indeed been visiting more frequently, always with legitimate business reasons, but staying longer than necessary. His presence filled rooms with light and laughter, a stark contrast to the charged darkness that surrounded her interactions with Grayson. "He's concerned about me," Lyla said, though even she could hear the defensiveness in her voice. "In love with you? Has been for years, I'd guess," as Grayson's tone was matter of fact, as if discussing the weather. "The question is whether you're going to break his heart gently or let him discover the truth about what you've become." "And what have I become?" "Mine." The word fell between them like a stone into still water, sending ripples through everything they'd carefully avoided acknowledging. Lila's breath caught in her throat as Grayson reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. "You know it as well as I do," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever this is between us, it crossed professional boundaries weeks ago. The only question is what we're going to do about it." Before she could respond, Oliver stepped onto the terrace, his smile faltering as he took in the intimate tableau. Grayson didn't pull his hand away immediately, letting the moment stretch until Oliver's discomfort was palpable. "Am I interrupting something?" Oliver's voice was carefully controlled, but Lyla could see the hurt flickering in his honey-colored eyes. "Just finishing up," Grayson said smoothly, finally withdrawing his hand. "Miss Anderson was telling me." "About your dinner plans?" "Dinner plans?" Oliver looked confused, then hopeful as he turned to Lyla. "I've been trying to reach you for days. Martha said you were too busy to take calls." Lyla felt trapped between two gravitational pulls, each man representing a different path her life could take. Oliver offered safety, normalcy, a chance to rebuild what she'd lost. But Grayson offered something far more dangerous and infinitely more compelling. He offered understanding. "I've been focused on Mr. Blackwood's treatment," she said carefully. "But dinner sounds lovely." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but Oliver's face lit up with relief. They made plans for the following evening, Oliver's enthusiasm a sharp contrast to the storm gathering in Grayson's eyes. After Oliver left, the atmosphere between them crackled with unspoken tension. They completed the afternoon session in relative silence, but every accidental touch, every shared glance, felt loaded with meaning. That night, Lyla found herself unable to sleep. She wandered the estate's halls like a ghost, eventually finding her way to the library, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city below. She wasn't surprised to find Grayson there, silhouetted against the glass like a dark angel. "Regrets?" he asked without turning around. "About what? About choosing dinner with him, over whatever this is?" He spun his wheelchair to face her, and in the moonlight, his eyes looked almost silver. "You could have said no. Could I have?" "No," he admitted with brutal honesty. "Because despite what you tell yourself, you're not in love with Oliver Hayes. You're in love with the idea of who you used to be, and he represents everything you lost. But that woman is gone, Lyla. She died in that car crash, along with Sarah Chen." His words cut deep because they rang with truth. "So what does that make me?" "It makes you perfect for someone like me." He reached out, his fingers finding hers. "In the darkness, someone who knows that redemption is a fairy tale and that the only honest thing left is to embrace what we've become, which is broken, dangerous, alive in ways that terrify normal people." His thumb traced circles on her palm, the touch both comforting and predatory. "Oliver can't handle that kind of truth, but I can." Lyla felt herself drowning in the intensity of his gaze and the promise of acceptance without judgment. But a small voice in her head, the last vestige of who she used to be, whispered warnings about the path she was considering. "This is madness," she breathed. "The best things usually are." Before she could lose her nerve, she leaned down and kissed him. It was desperate and hungry, and tasted like salvation and damnation combined. When they broke apart, Both were breathing hard. The careful distance they'd maintained shattered beyond repair. "Don't go to dinner with him," Grayson said against her lips. "I have to. I owe him an explanation." "You owe him nothing. But if you insist on playing the noble martyr, at least do it properly." His eyes glittered with something that might have been affection or possession. "Tell him the truth about us." "What truth?" "That I'm falling for a man who confessed to murder?" "On our second session. Tell him that you're exactly where you belong." The next evening, as Lyla sat across from Oliver in an upscale restaurant she couldn't afford, she realized Grayson had been right about one thing. The woman Oliver remembered, the woman he'd fallen in love with, was indeed dead. The person sitting across from him now was a stranger wearing a familiar face. "You seem different," Oliver said, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his distant, "Are you sure you're okay living at that place?" "Blackwood has a reputation for... double quotes. For what?" "For destroying people who get too close. I've heard stories, Lyla. Business partners who crossed him, employees who knew too much. All end up broken or missing." The concern in his voice was genuine, but all Lyla could think about was Grayson's hands on her skin. The way he'd looked at her as if she were the answer to a question he'd been afraid to ask. "Maybe some people need to be destroyed," she said, quietly. "Maybe that's the only way to become something new." Oliver's face paled. "Lyla, listen to yourself. This isn't you talking. Whatever hold he has on you, he doesn't have a hold on me. He sees me, the real me, not some idealized version from college." She pulled her hand away, watching hurt flood Oliver's features. "I'm not the person you remember, Oliver. That woman died in a car crash 6 months ago. That's not true. People can change, can heal. You just need time and help and love." She laughed, the sound hollow and bitter. "Is that your prescription, Dr. Hayes?" "Love will cure the guilt, the addiction. The blood on my hands, it's a start." "No," she said, standing from the table. "It's a lie. A beautiful, comforting lie that makes people feel better about the darkness in the world. But some of us can't afford that comfort anymore." She left him sitting there, surrounded by the debris of what they'd once shared. As she walked through the restaurant, she felt eyes following her, but attributed it to the scene she'd just caused. She didn't notice the man in the expensive suit who rose from a corner table and followed her into the night. When she arrived back at the estate, Grayson was waiting in the library, a crystal tumbler of whiskey balanced on his lap. He'd changed into a black shirt that made his eyes look like molten silver. "How did it go?" he asked, though his smile suggested he already knew. "You were right about everything. I usually am. It's a curse." She moved toward him like a moth drawn to flame, knowing she was about to burn, but unable to stop herself. When she reached his chair, he caught her hand, pulling her down until she was kneeling beside him, their faces inches apart. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with wanting. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back. No pretending this is just therapeutic. No saving yourself for someone worthy of redemption. I stopped believing in redemption the day I killed an innocent girl. Then welcome to hell, sweetheart. Population 2. He kissed her then, fierce and claiming, and Lyla felt the last pieces of her old self shattered like glass. In the distance, thunder rolled across the sky, and neither of them noticed the dark figure watching from the gardens below. 2 months after their first kiss, Lyla had stopped pretending their relationship was anything resembling professional. She slept in Grayson's bed now, waking each morning to find him already awake, watching her with an intensity that should have been unsettling but instead felt like coming home. They'd created their own twisted paradise within the estate's walls. It's built on shared darkness and mutual understanding. But paradise, Lyla was learning, always came with a price. She was reviewing Grayson's progress charts in the library when Martha appeared in the doorway, her usually warm expression troubled. "Miss Anderson, there's a gentleman here to see you. Says it's urgent." Lyla's blood turned to ice. Through the window, she could see a black sedan in the circular drive, identical to the one she'd noticed following her weeks ago, but had convinced herself was paranoia. Did he give a name? "Vincent Caruso. Says you know what it's about." The name hit her like a physical blow. Vincent Caruso wasn't just a creditor. He was the kind of man who broke fingers for late payments and disappeared people who owed him more than money. The kind of man who'd fronted her the cash for pills when her savings ran out. Always with a smile and the promise that payment could be flexible. "Tell him I'm not available," she managed. "I'm afraid that won't work," came a smooth voice from behind Martha. Vincent Caruso stepped into view, his expensive suit and predatory smile at odds with the violence that radiated from him like heat. "Hello, Lyla. You've been a very difficult woman to pin down." Grayson appeared in the hallway behind Vincent, his wheelchair moving with silent precision. His gray eyes took in the scene instantly, cataloging threats with a calculating mind that had made him one of the city's most feared men. "Mr. Caruso." Grayson's voice was deceptively calm. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Vincent's smile widened, revealing teeth like polished bone. "Mr. Blackwood, I was hoping to discuss a mutual acquaintance. It seems Miss Anderson here has been enjoying your hospitality while neglecting certain obligations." "What kind of obligations?" Grayson's tone could have frozen blood. "The kind that accrue interest. Daily." "Don't." Vincent pulled out a tablet, showing a spreadsheet with numbers that made Lyla's vision blur. $67,432. Plus fees, of course. The amount was staggering, though Lyla knew it was accurate. Months of high-grade pharmaceuticals, purchased through Vincent's network of corrupt medical professionals, had come with compound interest that would have made loan sharks blush. "I don't have that kind of money," she whispered. "No, but your employer does." Vincent's eyes shifted to Grayson, calculating and cold. "I'm sure a man of Mr. Blackwood's means could arrange a simple transfer. Consider it an investment in Miss Anderson's continued health and well-being." The threat was clear as crystal. Pay up, or Lyla would suffer consequences that extended far beyond financial ruin. Grayson's hands tightened on his armrests, and for a moment Lyla saw something murderous flicker in his eyes. "An interesting proposition," Grayson said finally. "But I'm afraid Miss Anderson's debts aren't my responsibility." Lyla's heart stopped. After everything they'd shared, all the intimacy and understanding, he was going to throw her to the wolves. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Of course, Vincent nodded, as if he'd expected this response. Perhaps we can discuss alternative arrangements. Miss Anderson has certain skills that could be valuable to my organization. Physical therapy isn't her only talent, I'm sure." The implication made Lyla's skin crawl. She'd heard rumors about Vincent's other businesses, the kind that trafficked in human misery and left broken people in their wake. "However," Grayson continued, his voice taking on a dangerous edge, "I am prepared to make a counteroffer." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." $100,000. Cash. In exchange for Miss Anderson's debt. And a guarantee that neither you nor your associates will contact her again. Generous. But I'm afraid the market value of Miss Anderson's particular circumstances has increased significantly. She's been living under my protection, after all. The price is now $200,000. Done. The word fell, like an executioner's blade. Lyla stared at Grayson in shock, unable to process that he'd just casually agreed to pay double her debt without hesitation. Vincent looked equally surprised, though he recovered quickly. "Excellent. I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately." "Paperwork," Grayson said coldly. "Cash transaction? Tonight." "And Mr. Caruso?" His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "If I discover that you've lied to me about the amount, or if any of your people so much as look in Miss Anderson's direction after tonight, I'll introduce you to some associates of my own. The kind who make your organization look like choir boys." Vincent's smile faltered slightly. Even predators recognized apex predators, and Grayson Blackwood's reputation for creative problem-solving preceded him. "Understood. Pleasure doing business with you both." After Vincent left, the silence in the library was deafening. Lyla stood frozen, overwhelmed by gratitude, shame, and something that felt dangerously close to love. When she finally found her voice, it came out as barely a whisper. "Why?" Grayson wheeled closer, his expression unreadable. "'Cause you're mine now, completely, and I protect what belongs to me. I'm not property to be bought and sold, aren't you? You just watched me purchase your freedom with the same casual indifference I'd use to buy a car. The only difference is that cars don't feel grateful afterward. His words were cruel, but there was something underneath them that softened the blow, something that looked almost vulnerable. I could have handled it myself, she said, though they both knew it was a lie. How? By running again. By finding another Vincent Caruso in another city, adding another layer to the debt that's already destroying you? He reached out, cupping her face in his hands. You were dying, Lyla. Slowly, quietly, but dying all the same. At least this way you get to live. As what, your kept woman? Your personal therapist with benefits? As my equal? Yes. Someone who understands. That love isn't about redemption or healing or becoming better people. Sometimes it's just about finding someone who can look at your worst self and choose to stay anyway. The honesty in his voice broke something open in her chest. She leaned into his touch, feeling tears she'd held back for weeks finally spill over. I can't love you, she whispered. I don't know how anymore. Then don't. Just stay. Let me carry the weight of caring for both of us until you remember how. That night, as they lay tangled together in his massive bed, Lyla traced the scars on Grayson's chest where shrapnel from the car accident had torn through skin and muscle. Each mark told a story of survival, of refusing to surrender even when surrender would have been easier. Tell me about Marcus Vale, she said quietly. The real story. Grayson was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow with old pain. He wasn't just investigating my father's business. He was investigating me.
Specifically?
My relationship with a 17-year-old girl named Alina Vasquez. Lyla's blood chilled. Grayson, not what you're thinking. Alina was the daughter of one of our factory workers, brilliant kid with dreams bigger than her circumstances. I was mentoring her, helping her get into college, giving her family money for her education. His laugh was bitter. Vale found out about the payments and constructed his own narrative. Rich predator grooming innocent victim kind of story that sells papers and destroys lives. So you killed him to protect yourself. I killed him to protect her. He was going to publish regardless of the truth, destroy an innocent girl's future to advance his career. Alina would have been branded as my victim for the rest of her life, her family ostracized, her dreams shattered. Grayson's eyes found hers in the darkness. So yes, I pushed him off that balcony. I'd do it again. Lyla felt something shift inside her, an understanding that transcended judgment. Where is she now, Alina? Stanford. Pre-med, full scholarship. She sends me a Christmas card every year. His smile was soft and genuine, the first she'd ever seen without sharp edges. She has no idea what I did to protect her future. And the accident? Vale's editor. Turns out crushing an investigation doesn't always kill the story. He hired professionals to send a message about the consequences of silencing journalists. Grayson's fingers traced patterns on her bare shoulder. They succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Hard to intimidate anyone from a wheelchair. But you survived. I survived. And I learned that sometimes the monsters we become are the only things standing between the innocent and the true darkness in this world. As dawn broke, over the estate, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Lyla made a choice that would define everything that followed. She would stay. Not because she'd been bought, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she'd found someone who understood that love wasn't about becoming better. Sometimes, it was about becoming exactly what the world needed you to be. But in the garden below their window, a figure in black clothing adjusted the telephoto lens on an expensive camera, capturing images that would soon make their way to very interested parties. The game was about to change, and neither Lyla nor Grayson had any idea how high the stakes were about to become. The photographs arrived on a Wednesday morning, delivered by courier in an envelope bearing no return address. Grayson spread them across his desk with the detached precision of a surgeon examining a fatal diagnosis. Each image told a story of intimate moments stolen from their private world, Lyla's hand on his face in the library, their kiss on the terrace, her silhouette in his bedroom window. Interesting composition, he murmured, as Lyla entered the study. Someone has an artistic eye. She approached the desk slowly, her face draining of color as she recognized the implications. How long have they been watching? Weeks, by the look of it. The question is, who commissioned this particular exhibition? Grayson's tone was conversational, but his eyes held the cold calculation of a man planning murder.
Outrageous.
Any thoughts on potential patrons of this art form? Before Lyla could answer, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen made her hands shake. Dr. Patricia Haynes, former head of Metropolitan General's Rehabilitation Department. The woman who'd supervised her suspension. Who'd looked at her with disappointment so profound, it had felt like physical violence. Answer it, Grayson instructed. Speakerphone. Lyla's finger hovered over the screen. Grayson, I answer it. Whatever they want, we face it together. The call connected to silence, then Dr. Haynes' crisp voice filled the room. Miss Anderson, I trust you've received our photographer's work by now. What do you want? Lyla's voice was steadier than she felt. Justice. Accountability. The things you've been avoiding since you killed Sarah Chen. Dr. Haynes' tone carried the weight of absolute moral authority. Did you really think you could disappear into that monster's mansion and escape the consequences of your actions? My license was already suspended. The lawsuit was settled. What more do you want? I want the truth about Sarah's death. The real truth, not the sanitized version your lawyers negotiated. Dr. Haynes paused, letting the words sink in. You weren't just texting when you crashed, were you, Lyla? You were high? Prescription opioids in your system? Reaction times compromised? Judgment impaired? A fact that was conveniently omitted from the official report. Grayson's eyes sharpened, focusing on Lyla with laser intensity. She felt exposed, vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with physical nakedness. The toxicology report was sealed. Lyla managed, sealed, not destroyed. And I have connections you never imagined. Connections who believe that justice delayed is justice denied. Dr. Haynes' voice carried cold satisfaction. You have 24 hours to turn yourself into the police and confess to vehicular manslaughter under the influence. These photographs and the toxicology report will find their way to every news outlet in the city, and if I do, then your relationship with Mr. Blackwood remains a private matter. Sordid, but private. The line went dead, leaving them in silence. That felt like the eye of a hurricane. Grayson stared at the photographs scattered across his desk, his expression unreadable. Well, he said finally, that's inconvenient? Inconvenient? Lyla's voice cracked with hysteria. They're going to destroy both of us. Your reputation, your business, everything you've built will survive. I've weathered scandals before. He gathered the photographs with methodical calm. The question is whether you're prepared to run again, or if you're finally ready to fight. Fight how, eh? Evidence, proof that I was using when Sarah died. There's no fighting that. There's always a way to fight. You just have to be willing to pay the price. Grayson's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the same cold calculation that had ended Marcus Vale's life. The question is how far you're willing to go to protect what we have? Before she could answer, Oliver's voice echoed from the foyer, raised in urgent conversation with Martha. Moments later, he burst into the study without ceremony, his usually composed demeanor shattered. Lyla, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours. His eyes were wild with panic as they darted between her and Grayson. There are reporters outside my office asking questions about you, about Sarah Chen. Someone leaked that toxicology report. I know, she said quietly. You know, that's all you have to say. Oliver's voice rose to a near shout. They're talking about criminal charges, Lyla. Prison time. Your life is about to implode, and you're sitting here like what? Grayson's voice cut through Oliver's tirade with surgical precision. Like someone who's finally stopped running from the truth? This has nothing to do with you, Blackwood. Everything about Lyla has to do with me now. Grayson wheeled closer to Oliver, his presence somehow more intimidating than men twice his size. The question is what you're prepared to do about it. Prepared to help her. To get her the legal representation she needs to stand by her through whatever comes next. Oliver's voice broke with emotion. 'Cause that's what you do for people you love. You protect them. Protect them, Grayson laughed, the sound like breaking glass. You mean, enable them? Cushion them from consequences until they're so soft? They can't survive in the real world. And your solution is what? Drag her down to your level? Make her complicit in whatever darkness you've surrounded yourself with. My solution is to show her that darkness isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be embraced, controlled, weaponized. Grayson's eyes found Lyla's across the room. Tell him, sweetheart, what you've learned about yourself since you've been here. Lyla felt torn between two versions of herself. The woman Oliver wanted to save and the woman Grayson had helped her become. One path led toward light and redemption, toward rebuilding what she'd lost and becoming worthy of forgiveness. The other led deeper into shadows, but offered the terrible freedom of absolute honesty. I've learned, she said slowly, her voice gaining strength with each word, that some people can't be saved. Some mistakes can't be undone. Sometimes the only honest thing left is to stop pretending otherwise. Oliver's face crumpled as if she'd struck him. Lyla, no, this isn't you. Whatever he's done to you, he's shown me who I really am, who I've always been, underneath the professional facade and moral pretensions. She moved to stand beside Grayson's chair, her hand finding his shoulder. I killed an innocent girl because I chose pills over responsibility. That's not a mistake, Oliver. That's who I am. Then change. People can change, can heal, can become better than their worst moments. Can they? Grayson's voice was soft as silk and twice as dangerous. Or do they just learn to hide their true nature behind prettier lies? The confrontation was interrupted by the sharp ring of Grayson's phone. He answered without looking away from Oliver, his voice professionally. Cordial. Blackwood, yes. I see how unfortunate. No, I don't think that will be necessary. He ended the call and smiled at Oliver with predatory satisfaction. It seems Dr. Patricia Haynes has had an unfortunate accident. Apparently she slipped in her shower this morning and suffered a severe head injury. She's in intensive care, condition critical. Such a shame when dedicated professionals meet with unexpected misfortune. The color drained from Oliver's face as the implication hit home. You? I didn't do anything. I've been here all morning, as Martha and the security cameras can attest. Grayson's smile was sharp as a blade. But accidents do happen, especially to people who threaten things I care about. You're a monster. Yes, and Lyla knew that when she chose to stay. Grayson's hand covered Lyla's where it rested on his shoulder, their fingers intertwining. The difference between us, Hayes, is that I don't pretend to be anything else. Oliver looked at Lyla one last time, his eyes pleading for some sign of the woman he'd once loved. But the person staring back at him was a stranger, someone who'd found peace in embracing her own capacity for darkness. I hope it was worth it, he said quietly before walking out of their lives forever. Later that evening, as news reports confirmed Dr. Haynes' tragic accident and the subsequent loss of key evidence in several pending cases, Lyla found herself on the terrace where their relationship had first shifted from professional to personal. Grayson joined her as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Any regrets? He asked. About which part? Choosing you over Oliver, or watching you destroy someone's life to protect me? Both, either. I want you to be sure about what you're signing up for. Lyla considered the question with the gravity it deserved. In the distance, city lights began to twinkle like fallen stars, each one representing lives that continued on, oblivious to the darkness that had just unfolded within the estate's walls. I'm sure, she said finally, but I have conditions. Name them. No more lies between us, no more secrets. If we're going to be monsters together, we do it honestly. Agreed? And your second condition? Help me get clean. Really clean. Not the careful balance I've been maintaining, but actually free of the pills. Grayson's smile was genuine, transforming his entire face. That might be the most dangerous thing you've ever asked me to do. It's more dangerous than falling in love with a murderer. Much more dangerous, because getting clean means facing everything you've been numbing, every moment of guilt, every ounce of self-hatred, every truth you've been avoiding. Are you prepared for that kind of pain? Lyla leaned down and kissed him, tasting promise and threat in equal measure. I'm prepared for anything, as long as you're there to catch me when I fall. Always, he murmured against her lips. Better. Or worse, in darkness and in light. I suspect we'll be spending most of our time in the shadows. 3 months later, Lyla stood in the same rehabilitation room where their relationship had begun, watching Grayson complete a set of exercises that would have been impossible when they first met. The pills were gone, flushed down the toilet in a ceremony that had felt like both funeral and baptism. The withdrawal had nearly killed her, but Grayson had been there through every moment of agony. Holding her hand while she screamed and offering comfort without judgment, Oliver had moved to another city, accepting a position that took him far. From the wreckage of what they'd once shared, Dr. Haynes had recovered from her accident, but retired early, claiming her memory of recent events was too compromised to continue her work effectively. You know what the irony is? Lyla said as Grayson finished his routine. Tell me. I'm a better therapist now than I ever was before. Turns out understanding rock bottom makes you better at helping people climb out of it. And I'm discovering that having someone to protect makes me more dangerous than I ever was alone. He reached for her hand, pulling her close. You make quite a pair. The broken leading the broken, the damned saving the damned. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, but neither of them minded the storm. They'd learned to find beauty in darkness, to build love from the fragments of their shattered selves. It wasn't the fairy tale ending either of them had once dreamed of, but it was real and honest and entirely their own, in a world full of beautiful lies. They'd chosen ugly truth, and somehow that made all the difference. Asterisk, let me know in the comments. Do you believe people can truly change, or do we just learn to hide our true nature better? Which character's choices resonated with you most? Subscribe for more intense emotional stories that explore the darker side of love and redemption. END